Very good afternoon. It is Friday the 2nd of August. Thanks for clicking on to today's Tropical Outlook. We do have plenty going on at the moment. But before we continue with the video, hit that like button, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so. We do have lots of content getting thrown out here 7 days a week here on marvoganweather.com on YouTube. And we have got a busy upcoming weekend as well. Tomorrow we will have the live stream, not Sunday, but tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. there will be a live stream for approximately a half an hour or so. I am going to be on the road traveling on Sunday and then flying down to South America on Monday. So there will be a couple of fluctuations on the scheduling over the next few days. So bear with me on that. But I will have some pre-recorded videos for you to check out while I'm traveling as well. So there will be still content on the channel, despite the fact that I'm going to be traveling. So yeah, I hope you can join me on the live stream tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the unusual day of Saturday as opposed to Sunday, but the reasons already explained just there. So yeah, the tropics are alive and kicking. We had the activity in the West Pacific. Now it's moving into the East Pacific, and now also moving into the Western Atlantic Basin. The fundamental reason behind that is quite straightforward. We do have the Madden Julian Oscillation now into phases 8 and 1. That promotes sinking over the East Pacific and the Western Atlantic Basin. So you can see here subsidence over the West Pacific Basin, hence why we've seen a shutdown of the activity here. The Indian monsoon is going to be a separate video. We're going to be looking at how active it has been. But despite the fact that the MJO has now moved out of the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, that has been essentially driving this very active first half to the monsoon season in the subcontinent, we are still seeing quite a lot of activity here due to other factors and forcing. So that will be discussed in a separate video into early next week. But today, obviously, we're looking at the tropics, and I will actually have a tropical video on Sunday afternoon as well. So all the more reason to hit that subscribe button if you're a lover of all things weather, both locally as well as globally. That is the goal here in the channel, to deliver unbiased, unhyped, accurate information. Summer so far has played out pretty darn well. I think June and July has been decent, and now we're entering the month of August. We'll see how the August forecast turns out, both the seasonal outlook that was produced at the end of May and also the monthly outlook, which tends to have a little bit more detail to it in terms of events as opposed to the seasonal, which gives you a kind of general idea and overview. But quite happy so far with regards to the summer forecast and the Atlantic Basin forecast. Obviously, hurricane season was produced earlier back in May as well. You can check that out and see how things are playing out with that also. So anyway, I'm waffling on as usual. Here is the reasons behind the activity in the East Pacific and what is likely to become the West Atlantic as well. We've got a pulse of MJO energy now in the East Pacific, and therefore we do have not one, not two, but three systems to keep an eye on. We've got an invest area over the East Pacific. We've got the Hurricane Carlotta now. That is going to be moving westwards. It's not going to have any impact on land. And we also have Invest 97L that is expected to develop. It's now over eastern portions of Cuba, and it's expected to make a beeline for Florida over the next few days. Latest by the National Hurricane Center in Miami shows that we have got Carlotta in the East Pacific, and we do have this system on the eastern shore of Cuba. Latest information as of 8 a.m. Eastern Time here, 60% chance of formation over the next 48 hours. The NHC says Straits of Florida and eastern Gulf of Mexico, a well-defined tropical wave is produced in a large area of poorly organized showers and thunderstorms over East Cuba, Hispaniola, and the southeast Bahamas and Jamaica, as well as the adjacent waters of the southwest Atlantic and Caribbean Sea. The wave is expected to move near or over Cuba throughout the day and then emerge over the Florida Straits. tonight and into Saturday. Environmental conditions are expected to become conducive for additional development after that time. And a depression is likely to form this weekend over the Straits of Florida and eastern Gulf of Mexico near the Florida Peninsula. Tropical storm watches and warnings could be required for portions of Florida later today. Regardless of development, heavy rains could cause flash flooding across Florida, Cuba, the Bahamas through the weekend, and interest in these locations should continue to be monitored for the progress of this system. A NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft is scheduled to investigate this system later on today. So yeah, interesting times with regards to the tropics. This is the latest GO 16 Channel 13 IR brightness temperature. You can see lots of convection over the East Pacific associated with that wave of MJO moving into this region through Central America, and then we've got the system just on the eastern tip of Cuba. We do have a trough that is dropping into the southeastern United States. We've got a building ridge over the southern half of the United States and a western Atlantic ridge of high pressure, the Bermuda High. And this feature is kind of going to run in between these two high pressure cells and get dragged in. Now, initially, the modeling had the system riding up the eastern side of the United States. Now, a lot of consensus is pulling it westwards into the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. So if we look at the specifics here seen by the long-range models, we can see what is going on. So if we can try and pull up the right chart, it would certainly help. I thought the Tropical Tidbits would have had the feature on the East Coast that is expected to become a developing system, but it isn't showing that. So let's improvise and go to the Western Atlantic view. So this is off the GFS model. You can see here the widespread area convection over the East Pacific. We've got several areas to look at here. Actually, if we go back to the NHC website here, you can actually see what is going on within the East Pacific. There's actually not one, but there's three features to look at here. So we've got one to the southeast and one to the southwest of Carlotta. One has a 40% chance of development over the next 48 hours, and we have a feature here, 20% development over the next 48 hours. And it's all because we've got quite a strong pulse of upward motion in the east portion of the Pacific. We also have a lot of warm waters underneath these features as well. As the atmosphere becomes more conducive, it's got plenty of fuel to draw on. So as we play through the loop here, you can see the potential development in the East Pacific, but it's all eyes on this feature here at 1006 millibars crossing over the lower Keys. And as we move into Sunday, the latest run of the GFS model sees a strong Bermuda High riding and taking that path around the outer periphery of the ridge into southwestern Florida, up through the spine of the peninsula, and then moving in a northeasterly direction here off the South Carolina coast and deepening into the 990s millibars, even the 980s millibars, 970s millibars, and then it kind of moves along the outer banks of North Carolina as a sub 975 millibar hurricane. So this is obviously one individual operational run of the GFS. There is multiple runs with different scenarios, but that is one scenario to look at according to the latest run of the GFS. And then it has another feature that tries to develop over the southwestern Caribbean, crossover the Yucatan here, and then moves up the western side of the Gulf of Mexico and towards Florida. It too sees deepening into the 980s and millibars here. So this is the active phase now. That MJO pulse rotating through the Americas and into the western side of the Atlantic basin. You can see here as I play through the loop, that pulse then eventually starts to shift into the West Atlantic. So therefore, we expect to see. So you can see everything panning out. The West Pacific lights up with the MJO, then the East Pacific, then the western side of the Atlantic will lighten up as the MJO rotates into the western portion of the Atlantic basin. Looking at the ensemble here of the model, and you can see what it's indicating here. So just bear with me a little bit of a second here and see what I can pull up here. So this is the Vogan Wind Max chart here of the GFS. So basically cyclonic turning within the atmosphere here. These yellow areas show the spin within the atmosphere. Now, if we go right the way back to the current time frame, it shows quite nicely the spin up of some of these waves that are coming off the African coastline here. So if we go back to the current view over the Atlantic basin, if I can try and find it, it would be certainly helpful. I'm as organised as ever, folks. I do apologise for this. Just clicked on the wrong chart. Anyway, no, I can't find it. But you can see here, there's that wave. There's that envelope of open low pressure. It's still an open wave here. It's not closed circulation. What you want to see is these contours. You can see this kind of bump in the pressure field. That indicates an open wave moving across the island of Cuba here. Lots of lofty mountains to speak about, obviously, here. There's that trough digging south here. Ridge of high pressure over South Texas here and the southern plains. We've got the Bermuda High here to the east. And essentially what that's doing is feeling that weakness, that trough in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere as the system then moves in a kind of west to northwesterly fashion here. So you can see here, it's kind of feeling the effects of that trough as it's moving across the southern United States. And it does become a somewhat closed feature. Look at the contours closing up. So it indicates that the circulation is wrapping around itself and then becoming its own entity as it moves up into the southwest of the Florida Peninsula. And according to the GFS ensemble, it then becomes a slightly open wave, then a closed wave once again as it moves into the off the southwestern portions of the Carolinas here, and then it moves up the east coast of North Carolina and possibly continues to run around the western flank of the Bermuda High, catches the westerlies, and then moves out into the North Atlantic here. So we'll need to keep an eye on what would be tropical storm, if not Hurricane Debby. I was going to say Betty. Debby is going to be the next name on the list here. And then as we play right the way through the GFS ensemble, it is not indicating much in the way of activity, which is quite interesting. Now, looking at the ocean heat content, this is a tweet here by Phil Klotzbach of CSU. Quite often refer to his information. He is one of the top tropical forecasters in the business, and CSU is quite often the kind of benchmark tropical forecast that comes out at the end of every spring. He's saying that today's ocean heat content, this is going back to the 29th of July, by the way, and he says that today's ocean heat content in the Atlantic Main Development Region exceeds the peak climatological MDR ocean heat content. So essentially the ocean heat content, which is a measure of warm water, not just at the surface, but deep below the surface, that then provides the unlimited high-octane fuel for tropical systems to develop, essentially has reached the peak that you would expect during the early portions of October. As you progress through the course of the summer, the oceans continue to warm, but they also continue to warm to deeper levels below the surface. And when you've got very high levels or record-breaking levels of ocean heat content, that has to be measured into the equation here. It's one thing having a conducive environment from an atmospheric point of view, but having a conducive ocean and temperature profile and ocean heat content all has to get measured into it. And it looks as if we are now at early October maximum heat content levels, and we're only in the beginning of August. The concern being with what is likely to become Debby is that Debby is going to be running, or to be Debby, should I say, is going to be running through Cuba and then moving into some very, very deep warm waters at 30 degrees Celsius, and that 30 degrees Celsius water extends well 100, 150 meters below the surface. So therefore, the system that moves into the Florida Straits will find a lack of dry air, a lack of dust, Saharan dust, for example, which had been quite noteworthy in the past couple of weeks. That is now dissipated. We have a low sheared environment. So as this circulation moves away from the mountains of Cuba over this warm waters, this deep warm waters, the system is likely to become stronger and better organized as it moves into the lower portion of the Florida Keys. Essentially, this is an area, a little chain of islands here with no mountains. It essentially is open ocean, so therefore the system is not necessarily going to feel the effects of the lower Florida Keys and then make a turn up towards the region in southwestern Florida near Naples as we move into the early portions of next week. But with this an oceanic environment, highly favourable, along with a highly favourable atmospheric environment as well, we are likely to see this system develop and could rapidly pick up intensity and organization as it moves into this region here before it makes a landfall, likely somewhere between, what would that be, kind of Lake Okeechobee here, all the way up to the Tampa Bay region here. That is likely to be where we will see some sort of a landfall here of the system. Now, waters within Tampa Bay itself is in the low 30s here. We've actually got 32 Celsius showing up here. So that is very, very warm waters indeed. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next several days here how the system organizes, how much interaction it has with Cuba, how much weakening does the system have. The circulation remains fairly weak, so therefore it should find, once it moves into the open warm waters of the Florida Straits, it will organize reasonably quickly. So we're going to monitor the situation going forward here. There will be a video on Sunday looking at the latest with this, and we will be looking at the other aspects in tomorrow's Global Weather Report edition 103. So I hope you can tune in for that as well. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow with the live stream. Bye for now.